I'm on a mission to go through and try every expansion's leveling, finding the good and the bad about each one, noting down everything and putting it in videos like this one. Last week we did Wrath of the Lich King, one of the most liked expansions of all time, but ever since Burning Crusade Classic came out, there's been a growing voice singing its praises. Today we will find out how well it lives up to modern times. There are many ways to level through an expansion. For that reason, I'm going to split things into 3 sections: questing, dungeons, and how well it prepares your character for current content, with a 4th overall rating at the end of the video. My goal is to make this as informative as possible, starting with... It is important to note that there is a big elephant in the room. Because of the Cataclysm revamp after Wrath, the Burning Crusade, which I will be shortening to BC or TBC, is technically the oldest content still in the game, outside of some of the holiday events. Whether that is a draw or a negative is really up to you to decide, but it does have an impact on the leveling, so I will be mentioning it a few times. Here's a prime example. The Burning Crusade has no flying after you perish. Thankfully, the content is very easy, so the chances of that happening are slim, but the chances do exist. If it does happen, you'll be running back the whole way. For me, it was far more likely to happen due to some of the choices I made. To test the questing in BC for this video, I went in with as fresh of a character as I possibly could. I did not use heirlooms, I didn't use any buffs like the Darkmoon Fair, though I do have the maxed out warband buff, which I can't get rid of. I also did not do any dungeons on this character. All the numbers I'm about to share in this section are from questing and using only questing gear. So just know, if you use heirlooms, do dungeons and all that, your leveling experience should be better than what I share here. My goal with this is to get a baseline. With that being said, how well did it go? For being the oldest questing available in the game, I expected it to be more simple. That's not to say it was hard to do, but so far this is definitely the closest to classic questing, that's a bit of a tongue twister, that I've ever done in retail, which completely makes sense, but dang does it make it a lot harder to rate. Let's talk through what I mean. The best way I can describe classic era leveling is to call it grounded. Over the years, World of Warcraft leveling has gotten more and more centralized and flow driven, compared to BC questing where there was no rules for how far a quest hub will send you. Here is the map of Hellfire Peninsula. I'm going to cross out the places on the map that do not get used for questing on your journey throughout it. Yeah, that's it. Aside from the Throne of Kil'jaeden, every piece of the zone is used for some kind of quest. Even the quest hubs, which are supposed to be the quote-unquote safe zones, have quests where everything happens entirely in their walls. And this is just from an Alliance perspective. Horde use the majority of this space too. Now some of you may be thinking, plenty of expansions questing uses the entire zone, and you're right, they do, but they don't do it like BC does it. It is utter chaos. This quest hub sends you here, and so does this one, which not only sends you there, but has you go all the way over here too, which is by the quest that the other hub sent you there to do as well. And oh hey look, this area has quests from here and here. Even other zones have you go back to the Hellfire Peninsula. There's even a quest that sends you out of Outland, back into Azeroth, just to get a dwarf a drink that he misses. Everything sends you everywhere, and nowhere is devoid of stuff to do. Whereas in later expansions, questing zones have flow to them. You get to an area with a quest hub, it sends you on tasks that are relatively close, then at the end of the hub, it sends you to the next area. It does eventually use the whole zone, but it is more structured. Burning Crusade is chaos questing, which again, makes it a lot harder to rate. On one hand, I like it. It fits the feel of a ravaged wasteland very well. It's a quality that the classic trilogy of WoW was just dripping in. But on the other hand, it has a level of complication that has been ironed out of modern World of Warcraft. Overabundance. It is the most subjective difference in leveling that exists in World of Warcraft today. It is a reason that there are people that only play Classic and only play Retail. Thankfully, I am someone who plays both. Not only that, but I like both the more structured style of questing through a zone and the everything everywhere style Burning Crusade uses. But there is one specific thing that is not so subjective. I'm gonna have to pull out the "it's very old content" card here. I know, boo. But the quest helper has troubles with BC questing. It is not that widespread, nor is it a major issue. However, there are some quests I just didn't do because it wasn't very clear and the quest helper wasn't tracking them properly. The reason it's not that big of a deal is because you don't need every quest. In fact, I still had 2 whole zones out of the 7 in BC that I didn't touch at all. I finished all of Hellfire Peninsula, Zengra Marsh, Blade's Edge Mountains, and Nagrand, which got me up to level 65. A bit of time spent in Shadowmoon Valley and I was level 70, which I hit from purely questing in 12 hours and 40 minutes of just in-game time. In total, I only used about a level's worth of rested XP to do so. Player choice is alive and well in BC questing, which is always a plus in my book. The biggest knock I could throw at BC questing, and its impact entirely depends on if you choose to use heirloom gear or not, is that the quest rewards are very much not up to modern standards. Specifically in terms of the gear it gives you. The stuff you actually wear as armor is great, but when it comes to rings, trinkets, and weapons, not so much. Throughout my whole journey leveling from quest, I got, drumroll please, 2 trinkets, and one of them was from the very first zone, so it's under item level 100, whereas the rest of my gear is between 200 and 300 item level. As for the weapon situation, it's not much better. I chose to level as a survival hunter, which basically can use every 2-handed weapon in the game. Halfway through leveling, I had to equip a gray weapon because I had over-leveled the one I got from the 4th quest I did in Burning Crusade. Like I said, this isn't an issue if you use heirlooms, but it is notable and I will talk more about it later. The quests themselves are, well, there's not much to say that I already haven't said. The actual quest objectives are what you can expect from classic era quests. None of them stood out as terrible quests. Some of the numbers could be lowered, that's for sure. Like a quest where you are tasked to take down 20 wildlife in the area, it doesn't need to be 20. There are some elite quests that can be hard to solo, but I was able to take down most of them by myself. As by myself as a hunter can be. All that's left is to give the questing experience of Burning Crusade a rating. I've written this part of the script a few times now. Each time the rating has been different, but I've made up my mind. Kinda. 6.5 out of 10. I will note it is a bunch of little things that are bringing the rating down. The lack of weapons and trinkets, some of the jankiness with the quest helper, the chaotic nature of just how far some of the quests will send you. It is not something that I can comfortably rate high when taking into consideration the masses. That being said, it has a particular niche that some people may absolutely love. At the end of the day, my rating is more of a suggestion. That's why it comes after I've talked about everything. If what I mentioned sounded really appealing to you, good. If it didn't sound appealing to you, also good. I liked questing through Outland, but I also know that it's not going to be for everyone. Let's see if that's true about... It sure would be nice to be able to talk about how relaxing the dungeons are, about how clear-cut the quality of them are. It would be wonderful if I didn't have to go through the inner turmoil I just experienced with raiding the questing section. Hi, I'm a healer main, which means my usual form of leveling a new character is through dungeons. If I were to make a big, giant tier list of all the dungeons in World of Warcraft, ranking them on how good they are for leveling, wink wink, TBC dungeons would have some of the best rated and some of the worst rated dungeons on the list. On that note, if I were to choose one expansion to level through dungeons in, it would probably be this or Wrath. Here's why. At the end of the day, outside of classic dungeons, BC has the most simple ones in the game. Not you Caverns of Time dungeons, I'll get to you in a bit. The vast majority of these dungeons are, you run through it. Take down the bosses, and that's it. You could look at these maps, draw a line from the entrance to the final boss, and it will be a straight, simple line to follow. By straight, I mean it doesn't end up looking like a traffic engineer graduate designed it as their first ever project. You know the dungeons that I'm talking about. Some of the later ones get wacky. Most of the Burning Crusade dungeons are as simple as the crossword puzzles on the back of a kid's menu. Look at Hellfire Ramparts. It's got to hold the record for the least amount of space used in any dungeon ever. What, you travel like 10 feet and you're at the final boss? And the quests in these dungeons couldn't be easier. They're all just loot quests, or pick up this random thing on your way quests, deal with these troublesome bosses quests. They are the cherry on top of the XP that you get from doing these dungeons.
They're quick too. They get longer depending on what zone they inhabit, mostly talking about the Netherstorm dungeons. In my Wrath video, I said that it was the real start of a standardized dungeon length. But after sitting down and looking through the BC catalog, they're about the same. So while I don't take that comment back, it does put it into question for sure. But Kale, you said that there's going to be inner turmoil. This is all just high praise. Yeah, well, it would be just high praise if the Caverns of Time didn't exist. Take everything I just said and throw it out the window for the Caverns of Time dungeons. I will give Blizzard credit, they are cool in concept, but Wrath did them so much better. This is one of the biggest cases of innovation was needed that I could possibly point out. They're long, they're confusing, the concept was great, but the execution was very much not. It's cool to go back in time and defend Medivh from an army of time invaders, but they spawned very slowly in unclear locations, with the damage scaling meaning one wipe and you have to start over. It was fun to do a prison break and get Thrall out of there, but the pathing was terrible, the objectives were unclear, and you had more waiting for things to spawn. Not only that, but neither of them had good quests. They are perfect examples of bad dungeons for leveling. I have seen more people leave at the start of these two dungeons than any other expansions combined. On the very bright side, Burning Crusade has so many dungeons, the chance that you get these two are slim. My condolences if you get them on repeat. I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. The high highs are what really make BC dungeons appealing to me, so I'm gonna ride the hope train here and give them an 8 out of 10. Fingers crossed that you don't get the Caverns dungeons. Your experience will be so great otherwise. I've already talked about the gearing from questing a bit, but how bad is the situation really? Just like in the last video, the standard I am using is dungeon ready for the War Within, so our target is item level 350. My weapon actually ended up in a decent spot, 344. Most of the armor I got was above 300. The issue is, as I stated before, the accessories. My trinkets combined are item level 350. As I said, I got 2 on my entire journey. One of them is sitting at item level 87, with one of my rings at 135. These 2 blemishes, along with a 231 cloak, have left my character at item level 292, far from the target goal. However, I know why this happened. The loot distribution in TBC is heavily dungeon based. You want a trinket? Run some dungeons. You want a weapon? Run some dungeons. Just in the same way you didn't really get trinkets in vanilla until endgame content. That was just the loot design philosophy back then, but that doesn't mean it gets a pass. As a little experiment, I put on an heirloom trinket and a ring, which shot my item level all the way up to 320 from the 292. So this is only really an issue if you don't have any heirlooms and you get unlucky in any dungeons you run. Perhaps the 5,500 gold I made can go towards getting some upgrades. At level 71 you get access to the War Within crafted gear, which will be a lot cheaper. But some of that gold is going to be going towards buying bags. The best bag I looted was a 10 slot, and I only ended up with 3 bags in total, not including my backpack. I was expecting this, to be honest. Gearing just worked differently back in Burning Crusade. I can already make a prediction that this will probably be the worst for gearing your character if you do only quests. The dungeons give a good amount of loot though. Altogether, I'm putting how well it preps your character at a 5 out of 10. Almost 60 item levels off being able to queue War Within dungeons? Yeah, that's just not gonna cut it. It's only even a 5 because I have faith that the dungeon loot will make up for it, but that's RNG. I did play TBC Classic. I played a good bit of it actually, so I had a decent idea going into this on how well it would perform. Overall, this is the expansion I could give the most subjective award to. For a decent amount of players, it could be the best choice for them. It's an enjoyable experience. But for the majority, I don't think I can recommend it. Especially not as a first expansion to level in when you're just getting into the game. For that reason, I am putting the overall score at 6 out of 10. Even writing that feels harsh. If you're looking for short, simple dungeons, TBC is great for leveling, but there are better options. Hit that like button if you enjoyed or found this helpful. If you want to see how well Wrath of the Lich King did, click the video on the right. My name has been Kale. Have a very good journey.